The morning sun was just breaking through the clouds when James pulled into the parking lot of Hartwell Insurance Group. He had been making this same drive for 8 years now, arriving at 6 a.m. sharp to start his cleaning rounds before the office workers showed up. At 52, James took real pride in his work. While others might see janitorial work as just a job, he saw it as keeping a professional space running smoothly for hundreds of employees. James grabbed his keys and headed to the employee entrance. The security guard, Tony, waved him through with the usual friendly nod. Tony had worked the night shift for almost as long as James had been cleaning, and they had developed an easy friendship over the years. "Morning, James. How's the family?" Tony called out. "Good, thanks for asking. My daughter just made the honor roll again," James replied, unable to hide the pride in his voice. His daughter Lisa was a junior in high school and had her sights set on college. Everything James did was for his family, his wife Patricia, who worked as a nurse at the local hospital, and their 2 kids. James made his way up to the executive floor, starting his routine. He had learned over the years that the executives liked their offices spotless when they arrived. He emptied trash bins, vacuumed carpets, cleaned windows, and made sure everything was in perfect order. He never touched personal items on desks or opened drawers. That was a strict rule he followed religiously. The executive floor was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. James worked methodically, room by room. When he reached Mrs. Catherine Whitman's office, he noticed she had left some papers scattered on her desk. Mrs. Whitman was the vice president of claims, a woman in her mid-40s who always dressed impeccably and drove a luxury car. James had cleaned her office hundreds of times, and she had always been polite but distant. He emptied her trash can, vacuumed around her desk, and cleaned the windows that overlooked the city. Everything seemed normal. James finished the executive floor by 8 a.m. and moved on to the other floors, completing his rounds just as employees started arriving for the day. By 10 a.m., James was in the supply closet restocking his cleaning cart when he heard commotion coming from the executive floor. Raised voices, hurried footsteps. He didn't think much of it at first. Executives were often stressed about deadlines and meetings. But then his supervisor, Rita, came rushing down the hallway, looking worried. Rita had been working at the company for 15 years and had always treated James fairly. She was the kind of supervisor who remembered birthdays and asked about family. "James, I need you to come with me right now," she said, her voice tight with concern. "What's wrong? Did I miss something in my cleaning?" James asked, already running through his morning routine in his head. "Just come with me, please." They walked to the executive conference room, where James saw Mrs. Whitman sitting at the table with 2 security officers and a man in a suit he didn't recognize. Mrs. Whitman's eyes were red, as if she had been crying. "James," Rita said softly, "Mrs. Whitman is reporting that a very valuable ring is missing from her office. She says she left it in her desk drawer last night before leaving work." James felt his stomach drop. "I don't understand. I never open desk drawers. I never touch personal items. You know that, Rita." The man in the suit stepped forward. "I'm Detective Miller from the police department. We need to ask you some questions about your activities last night. I cleaned Mrs. Whitman's office like I do every morning. I emptied the trash, vacuumed, cleaned the windows. That's it. I never opened any drawers or touched anything on her desk." Mrs. Whitman looked up at James, her face a mixture of anger and sadness. "My engagement ring is missing. It's worth $15,000. Security cameras show you were the only person in my office overnight." James felt the world spinning around him. $15,000? He had never even seen that much money in one place. "Mrs. Whitman, I swear I never took anything. I would never steal from anyone, especially not from my workplace." Detective Miller was taking notes. "We're going to need to search your locker and your car if that's okay with you." "Of course, search everything. I have nothing to hide." James's hands were shaking now. In 8 years of working here, he had never had so much as a complaint about his work. He had found wallets, jewelry, and cash left behind by employees and always turned them in immediately. The search turned up nothing. Of course, but Detective Miller explained that didn't necessarily mean anything. "Stolen items are often hidden or sold quickly," he said. Rita looked heartbroken. "James, I'm sorry, but company policy requires that we suspend you pending the investigation. You'll need to turn in your keys and badge." The next few hours passed in a blur. James called Patricia at the hospital to tell her what was happening. She left work immediately to meet him at the police station, where he was formally questioned and had to provide fingerprints. No charges were filed yet, but Detective Miller made it clear that the investigation was just beginning. By evening, the local news had picked up the story. Insurance company employee accused of stealing diamond ring flashed across the television screen. They didn't use James's name, but in a town this size, word traveled fast. James sat at his kitchen table staring at his hands. These were hands that had worked honestly his entire life. He had served in the military, worked construction, and then found steady employment at Hartwell Insurance. He had never taken so much as a pen that didn't belong to him. Patricia sat beside him, holding his hand. "We'll get through this, honey. The truth will come out." But James wasn't so sure. He knew how these things worked. A missing expensive ring, a black janitor with access to the office, security cameras showing he was there alone. It looked bad and he knew it. His phone started ringing, reporters wanting his side of the story. Patricia unplugged the phone from the wall. The last thing they needed was to say something that might make things worse. Lisa and their younger son David came home from school with questions. Kids at school were talking about it. Lisa was crying, asking how people could think her father was a thief. "Sometimes bad things happen to good people," James told his children. "But we have to keep believing that the truth matters. We have to have faith that justice will win out." As night fell, James lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, Detective Miller would continue the investigation. Tomorrow, he would have to figure out how to pay bills without his income from the insurance company. Tomorrow, he would have to face a community that might see him as just another stereotype. But tonight, all he could do was hold on to his faith and the love of his family, and hope that somewhere in this mess, someone would care enough to find out what really happened to Catherine Whitman's ring. The truth was out there. He just had to believe that someone would be willing to dig deep enough to find it. Detective Lucy Chen had been working cases for 12 years, and she had learned to trust her instincts. When she walked into the Hartwell Insurance building the next morning, something about this case felt off. Maybe it was the way Mrs. Whitman kept dabbing at her eyes with tissues, or maybe it was the way James Washington had looked her straight in the eye when he said he didn't take the ring. Lucy had seen plenty of guilty people, and they usually couldn't maintain eye contact. They fidgeted, changed their stories, or got defensive. James had done none of those things. He answered every question clearly and asked if there was anything else he could do to help prove his innocence. Still, Lucy knew she had to follow the evidence, not her gut feelings. She started by reviewing the security footage with the building's head of security, a retired police officer named Frank Rodriguez. "Show me everything from yesterday afternoon through this morning," Lucy said, settling into a chair in the small security office. Frank pulled up multiple camera angles. "Here's Mrs. Whitman leaving her office at 6:15 p.m. yesterday. She locked her office door behind her." The footage showed Mrs. Whitman walking briskly down the hallway, purse over her shoulder, looking like someone eager to get home. And here's James starting his cleaning rounds at 6 a.m. this morning. The cameras showed James entering the building, greeting the night security guard and beginning his methodical cleaning routine. Lucy watched carefully as James cleaned Mrs. Whitman's office. He emptied the trash can, vacuumed the floor, and cleaned the windows. At no point did the cameras show him approaching her desk or opening any drawers. "That's interesting," Lucy murmured. "Frank, is there any camera angle that shows the desk area more clearly?" Frank switched to a different view. "This angle shows most of the office, but the desk is partially blocked by that filing cabinet." Lucy made a note to request additional footage from any cameras in the hallway that might have captured more detail. She also wanted to interview other employees who might have been in the building. Her next stop was Mrs. Whitman's office. Catherine Whitman was at her desk, looking composed but tired. She was an attractive woman in her mid-40s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and expensive clothing. "Mrs. Whitman, I know this is difficult, but I need to go through exactly what happened yesterday." "Of course, Detective. I want to help in any way I can." Catherine's voice was steady, professional. "Tell me about the ring. When did you last see it?" "I took it off Monday afternoon when I was washing my hands in my private bathroom. I always put it in my desk drawer when I do that. The top right drawer. I've done it hundreds of times." Lucy looked at the desk drawer. It was unlocked. "Do you normally lock this drawer?" "No, I never felt the need to. This is the executive floor. Only senior staff and cleaning personnel have access. And you're certain you put the ring in this drawer yesterday? Catherine nodded firmly. Absolutely certain. I had been wearing it all day, took it off to wash my hands around 5 p.m. and put it right in that drawer. When I came in this morning and went to put it back on, it was gone. Lucy made notes while Catherine spoke. Something nagged at her about the timeline. What time did you discover it was missing? About 9:30 this morning. I always put my ring back on first thing when I arrive at work. Lucy spent another 20 minutes going over details with Catherine, then asked to speak with Rita Gonzalez, James's supervisor. Rita had worked at Hartwell Insurance for 15 years and clearly knew the cleaning staff well. Detective, I can tell you with complete confidence that James has never taken anything that didn't belong to him, Rita said, settling into a chair across from Lucy in a small conference room. Just last month, he found a designer watch that someone left in the bathroom. Instead of keeping it or ignoring it, he brought it straight to me. We tracked down the owner. It belonged to one of the accountants who had forgotten it. Has he ever had access to Mrs. Whitman's desk before? James doesn't open desk drawers or touch personal items. That's a strict policy for all cleaning staff, and James follows it religiously. In 8 years, I've never had a single complaint about him touching things he shouldn't. Lucy made more notes. Is there anyone else who would have had access to Mrs. Whitman's office yesterday evening or this morning? Rita thought for a moment. The security guards do occasional rounds, but they don't usually go into individual offices unless there's a problem. Executive assistants sometimes have keys, but Mrs. Whitman's assistant, Jennifer, was out sick yesterday and today. After interviewing Rita, Lucy decided to talk to other employees who worked on the executive floor. She spoke with 3 other executives who had offices near Catherine's. 2 of them had barely noticed James during his cleaning rounds. He was just part of the background to them. But the 3rd executive, Mr. Peterson, had something interesting to say. I got in early this morning around 7:30, Peterson told Lucy. I saw James finishing up his cleaning on our floor. But I also noticed Catherine's office door was already closed and locked when I arrived. Lucy felt a small alarm bell go off in her head. Are you sure about the timing? Positive. I remember because I was surprised to see Catherine's door closed so early. Usually the cleaning staff props doors open while they work, then closes them when they're done. This was a discrepancy Lucy needed to explore. She went back to review the security footage more carefully, this time focusing on the exact timing of when James entered and left Catherine's office. The cameras showed James entering Catherine's office at 6:47 a.m. and leaving at 7:03 a.m., but Mr. Peterson said Catherine's door was already closed when he arrived at 7:30 a.m. That meant James had locked the door when he finished cleaning, which was standard procedure. Lucy decided to visit James at his home to get his side of the story in a more relaxed setting. James lived in a modest neighborhood about 15 minutes from downtown. His house was small but well-maintained, with a neat lawn and flower boxes in the windows. Patricia Washington answered the door. She was a woman in her late 40s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Detective Chen? James is in the backyard with the kids. Please come in. The house was clean and comfortable, filled with family photos and children's artwork. Lucy could see James through the kitchen window, pushing his young son on a swing set while his teenage daughter sat nearby doing homework. Mrs. Washington, this must be very difficult for your family. Patricia nodded, her composure wavering slightly. James is a good man, Detective. He's worked hard his whole life to provide for us. The idea that he would steal anything, it's just impossible. James came inside when Patricia called him. Up close, Lucy could see the strain on his face. He looked like a man who hadn't slept much. James, I want you to walk me through exactly what you did in Mrs. Whitman's office yesterday morning. James sat at his kitchen table and went through his routine step by step. His story was consistent with what he had told her the day before, and consistent with what the security cameras showed. James, in your 8 years of working there, have you ever noticed anything unusual about Mrs. Whitman? Any behavior that seemed strange or out of character? James thought carefully. Not really. She's always been polite but distant. Professional, you know? Though, he paused. What is it? Well, about 2 weeks ago, I did notice her staying very late several nights in a row. I'd arrive at 6 a.m. and her office light would still be on from the night before. That was unusual. Most executives are gone by 6 or 7 p.m. Lucy made a note of this. Did you see what she was working on? No, I never look at papers on desks. But she seemed stressed, more stressed than usual. As Lucy drove back to the police station, her instincts were telling her that this case wasn't as simple as it appeared. A ring worth $15,000, a janitor with 8 years of spotless service, and an executive who had been working late into the night recently. She decided to dig deeper into Catherine Whitman's background. If James Washington was innocent, then someone else had taken that ring. And Lucy was beginning to suspect that the real story was much more complicated than a simple theft. Back at her desk, Lucy pulled up Catherine Whitman's basic information and started making phone calls. Something about this case didn't add up, and she was determined to find out what really happened to that diamond ring. Detective Lucy Chen spent the next morning digging into Catherine Whitman's financial records. What she found made her sit back in her chair and whistle softly. For someone earning a 6-figure salary as a vice president, Catherine's finances were a disaster. Credit card bills showed thousands of dollars in charges every month. Expensive restaurants, designer clothing, luxury spa treatments. But what really caught Lucy's attention were the regular charges to Lucky Star Casino and Riverbend Gaming. Catherine was gambling, and from the looks of her bank statements, she was losing badly. Lucy called Catherine's bank to get more details. The customer service representative confirmed that Catherine's checking account had been overdrawn multiple times in the past 6 months. Her savings account, which had once held over $30,000, was now down to less than $200. This is very interesting, Lucy murmured to herself. She pulled up Catherine's divorce records, which were public information. The divorce had been finalized just 8 months ago, and it hadn't been friendly. Catherine's ex-husband had gotten the house, and Catherine had been left with significant debt. Meanwhile, James Washington was dealing with his own problems. The story had made the local newspaper, and while they hadn't used his name, everyone in town seemed to know who the accused janitor was. Patricia had to deal with whispers at the hospital where she worked. Their daughter Lisa was being teased at school, and their son David had gotten into a fight when someone called his dad a thief. James had applied for unemployment benefits, but the process was slow. Without his income from the insurance company, the family was struggling to pay their mortgage and other bills. Patricia had picked up extra shifts at the hospital, but it wasn't enough. "I should look for another job," James told Patricia one evening as they sat at the kitchen table reviewing their bills. "You shouldn't have to look for another job," Patricia replied firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong. We have to believe that Detective Chen will find the truth." But James was losing hope. He had called a lawyer, but legal fees were expensive, and they couldn't afford to pay for a strong defense if charges were filed against him. Detective Chen, meanwhile, was following a new lead. She had requested Catherine's insurance records and discovered something very interesting. Just 3 months ago, Catherine had increased her jewelry insurance coverage significantly. Her engagement ring, which had been insured for $8,000, was now covered for $15,000. Lucy called the insurance company that held Catherine's personal policy. "I need to know if Mrs. Whitman has filed any recent claims or made any inquiries about the claims process," she told the representative. "I can't give you specific details without a warrant, but I can tell you that Mrs. Whitman did call our claims department last month, asking about the process for reporting stolen jewelry." Lucy felt her pulse quicken. "Did she file an actual claim?" "Not yet, but she requested all the necessary paperwork." This was getting very interesting. Lucy decided to expand her investigation beyond just the office building. She drove to the neighborhood surrounding Hartwell Insurance and started checking with local businesses. Pawn shops, jewelry stores, anywhere someone might try to sell a valuable ring. At her third stop, Golden State Pawn, the owner recognized Catherine Whitman's photo immediately. "Oh yeah, she was in here last Tuesday," the pawn shop owner, Bobby Martinez, told Lucy. "Classy lady seemed nervous, though. She pawned a diamond ring, said she needed quick cash for a family emergency." Lucy's heart was racing now. "Do you still have the ring?" "Sure do. She has 30 days to buy it back. Here's the receipt." The receipt showed that Catherine had pawned a diamond engagement ring for $3,000. The description matched the ring she had reported stolen. "Mr. Martinez, I'm going to need that ring as evidence, and I'll need a copy of all the paperwork, including the ID she showed you." Bobby handed over the ring and the documents. Is this lady in some kind of trouble? She seemed really desperate when she came in. That's what I'm trying to figure out, Lucy said. Armed with this new evidence, Lucy drove back to Hartwell Insurance. She needed to confront Catherine, but she wanted to be strategic about it. First, she called the district attorney's office to discuss the case. So let me get this straight, District Attorney Robert Hayes said over the phone. The woman who reported her ring stolen actually pawned it herself a week earlier? That's right. And she increased her insurance coverage on the ring just 3 months ago. She also called her insurance company asking about the claims process. Sounds like insurance fraud to me, but why frame the janitor? I think she needed a fall guy, someone who had access to her office, someone who would be an easy target for suspicion. Lucy knew she had to be careful about her next steps. She decided to visit Catherine's ex-husband to get more background information. Robert Whitman lived across town in a large house that he had apparently kept in the divorce settlement. Detective, I'm not surprised to hear Catherine is in financial trouble, Robert told Lucy as they sat in his living room. The gambling problem got worse after our separation. She was hiding debts from me for years. Did she ever mention anything about her jewelry or insurance? Robert nodded grimly. About 6 months ago, before our divorce was final, she asked me about adding more insurance coverage to her engagement ring. She said it had appreciated in value. I thought it was odd at the time because we were getting divorced, but I figured she just wanted to protect her assets. Mr. Whitman, do you think your ex-wife would be capable of framing an innocent person? Robert was quiet for a long moment. Detective, the woman I married 12 years ago wouldn't have been capable of that. But the woman Catherine became in the last few years with the gambling and the debt and the desperation, I honestly don't know what she might do. Lucy drove back to her office to prepare for what would be a very difficult conversation with Catherine Whitman. She had the pawnshop receipt, the insurance records, and testimony about Catherine's financial problems. But she also knew that Catherine might lawyer up the moment she realized she was a suspect rather than a victim. Meanwhile, James Washington was at home helping his daughter with her homework when his phone rang. It was Detective Chen. James, I can't go into details yet, but I want you to know that we're making progress on your case. New evidence has come to light that might change everything. Detective, I've been praying every night that the truth would come out. Are you saying you believe I didn't take that ring? James, I'm saying that I think this case is much more complicated than it first appeared. I need you to be patient for just a little longer while I finish my investigation. After hanging up, James felt a spark of hope for the first time in days. Patricia hugged him tightly, and they both felt like maybe, just maybe, their nightmare might be coming to an end. But Lucy Chen knew that confronting Catherine Whitman would be the most challenging part of her investigation. She was about to accuse a well-respected executive of not only insurance fraud, but also of deliberately destroying an innocent man's reputation. The truth was about to come out. But Lucy had a feeling that Catherine Whitman would not go down without a fight. Detective Lucy Chen walked into Hartwell Insurance the next morning with a folder full of evidence and a heavy heart. She was about to destroy someone's life, but that someone had already tried to destroy James Washington's life with lies and manipulation. Catherine Whitman was at her desk, looking as polished and professional as always. But Lucy noticed something different about her today. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, and her hands seemed to shake slightly as she typed on her computer. Mrs. Whitman, I need to speak with you privately. Could we use a conference room? Catherine looked surprised. Of course, Detective. Have you made progress in finding my ring? Have you arrested that janitor yet? Lucy didn't answer. She simply followed Catherine to a small conference room and closed the door behind them. Catherine sat across from her, still maintaining her composed executive demeanor. Mrs. Whitman, I need to ask you some questions about your financial situation. The color drained from Catherine's face, but she tried to maintain her composure. I'm not sure what my personal finances have to do with a theft case, Detective. Lucy opened her folder and pulled out Catherine's bank statements. These records show that you've been struggling with debt for months. Your checking account has been overdrawn repeatedly, and your savings are nearly gone. How did you get my private financial records? Catherine's voice was rising. I have a warrant, Lucy said calmly. Mrs. Whitman, these records also show regular payments to gambling establishments. The Lucky Star Casino, River Bend Gaming. Thousands of dollars every month. Catherine stood up abruptly. This is outrageous. I'm the victim here. Someone stole my ring, and instead of finding the thief, you're invading my privacy. Sit down, Mrs. Whitman. Lucy's voice was firm but not unkind. I also have records showing that you increased your insurance coverage on your engagement ring 3 months ago. From $8,000 to $15,000. Catherine sat back down, but her hands were visibly shaking now. I had the ring appraised. It had increased in value. That's perfectly normal. Lucy pulled out another document. This is a record of a phone call you made to your insurance company last month, inquiring about the process for filing a jewelry theft claim. I was concerned about security. After hearing about other thefts in office buildings, Mrs. Whitman, Lucy said gently, I visited Golden State Pawn yesterday. The owner, Bobby Martinez, identified you from a photograph. You pawned your engagement ring there last Tuesday for $3,000. The silence in the room was deafening. Catherine stared at Lucy, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to speak but couldn't find words. Lucy pulled the ring out of an evidence bag and placed it on the table between them. Is this your engagement ring, Mrs. Whitman? Catherine looked at the ring, and her carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Tears started flowing down her cheeks and her shoulders began to shake. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. Mrs. Whitman, I need you to tell me exactly what happened, and I should inform you that you have the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney. No, I need to tell someone. I can't carry this anymore. Catherine buried her face in her hands. The gambling debts were crushing me. After my divorce, I thought I could win back what I had lost, but I just kept losing more. I owed people dangerous money, Detective. Lucy waited patiently while Catherine composed herself enough to continue. I pawned the ring to pay off some of the most urgent debts. But I knew that wouldn't be enough long term. I needed the insurance money to really get out from under everything. So you decided to report it stolen. I thought it would be simple. Report it stolen, collect the insurance, quietly buy it back from the pawn shop later. But then the insurance company said they needed a police report, and that's when you decided to blame James Washington. Catherine nodded miserably. I knew he was the only one with access to my office overnight. I thought it would be believable. A cleaning person with access, no witnesses. Lucy felt sick to her stomach. Mrs. Whitman, do you understand what you did to that man? He's been suspended from his job. His family is struggling to pay bills. His children are being bullied at school. I know. Catherine was sobbing now. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I was just so desperate. The people I owed money to were making threats. I was scared. Did you plant any evidence to make James look guilty? Catherine nodded through her tears. I moved some things around on my desk to make it look like someone had been searching through my drawers. I unlocked the drawer where I claimed to have kept the ring. I even messed up some papers to make it look like someone had been looking for valuables. Lucy was taking notes, but part of her mind was on James Washington, sitting at home wondering if his life would ever return to normal. Mrs. Whitman, I'm placing you under arrest for insurance fraud, filing a false police report, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Lucy stood up and pulled out her handcuffs. Detective, please. I'll make this right. I'll tell everyone that James is innocent. I'll pay back the insurance company. I'll do whatever you want. Mrs. Whitman, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. As Lucy handcuffed Catherine, she could hear her continuing to sob and apologize. But Lucy's mind was already moving ahead to her next task, calling James Washington and telling him that his nightmare was over. Within an hour, news of Catherine's arrest had spread throughout Hartwell Insurance. Employees who had whispered about James behind his back were now feeling ashamed. Rita Gonzalez called James immediately to tell him he was not only cleared of all suspicion, but was welcome back to work whenever he was ready. James, I'm so sorry about what you've been through, Rita said over the phone. The company wants to make this right. We're giving you full back pay, and Mr. Hartwell himself wants to meet with you to apologize personally. But James was still processing the news. After days of feeling like his world was falling apart, he couldn't quite believe it was over. Detective Chen called him an hour later. James, I wanted to personally tell you that Mrs. Whitman has confessed to everything. She pawned her own ring and then falsely accused you to cover up her insurance fraud scheme. Detective, I don't know how to thank you. I was starting to lose faith that anyone would believe me. James, I'm sorry it took so long to get to the truth, but I want you to know that from the moment I met you, something about this case didn't feel right. Your character and your honesty came through loud and clear. As James hung up the phone, Patricia wrapped her arms around him. Their children gathered around, and for the first time in over a week, the Washington family felt like they could breathe again. The truth had finally come out. But James knew that the real test would be rebuilding his reputation in the community and learning to trust again after being so wrongly accused. Still, as he looked at his family gathered around him, he felt grateful that there were still people like Detective Chen who cared about finding the truth, no matter how long it took. 2 weeks after Catherine Whitman's arrest, James Washington walked back into Hartwell Insurance for the first time since the accusations began. He had been nervous about this moment, wondering how his co-workers would react, whether people would look at him differently. To his surprise, Tony the security guard met him at the entrance with a firm handshake and a genuine smile. James, it's good to have you back, man. I never believed those accusations for a second. As James walked through the building, employees stopped what they were doing to welcome him back. Some apologized for doubting him. Others simply expressed relief that the truth had come out. Rita Gonzalez was waiting for him with tears in her eyes. James, I am so sorry for what you went through. The company should have stood by you from the beginning. Rita, you did stand by me. You vouched for my character when it mattered most. That meant everything to me and my family. Mr. Hartwell, the company's president, had requested a meeting with James that first morning back. James had been nervous about facing the man whose company had suspended him, but Mr. Hartwell surprised him. James, please sit down. I owe you an apology that I can never fully express. Mr. Hartwell was a man in his 60s who had built the company from the ground up. What happened to you was wrong on every level. We should have investigated more thoroughly before taking any action against you. Mr. Hartwell, I understand you had to follow company policy. No, James. Policy is one thing, but justice is another. A man with your record of honesty and dedication deserved better from us. Mr. Hartwell slid an envelope across his desk. This contains your back pay, plus additional compensation for what you and your family endured. It's not enough to undo the harm, but it's a start. James opened the envelope and saw a check that was significantly larger than just his back pay. Sir, this is very generous, but I just want my job back and my reputation cleared. You have both, James. But I want to do more than that. I'm creating a new position, Head of Facilities Management. It comes with a substantial raise and your own office. You'd oversee all the building maintenance and cleaning operations? James was stunned. Mr. Hartwell, I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it. You've shown integrity under pressure that most people never face. That's the kind of character I want in leadership positions at this company. Meanwhile, Catherine Whitman was facing the consequences of her actions. She had been released on bail, but was awaiting trial for insurance fraud and filing false police reports. Her lawyer had advised her to plead guilty in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence. The local newspaper ran a follow-up story about the case, this time focusing on James's vindication and Catherine's arrest. The headline read, Insurance Executive Arrested for Framing Innocent Janitor. The story sparked conversations in the community about assumptions, prejudice, and the importance of thorough investigations. Detective Lucy Chen was commended by the police chief for her thorough work on the case. Detective Chen refused to accept the obvious answer when her instincts told her something was wrong. Chief Martinez told the local paper. Her commitment to finding the truth, regardless of how complicated it made the case, is exactly what we expect from our officers. Lucy visited James at his home one evening to check on how he was adjusting to everything. Detective Chen, I can't thank you enough for believing in me when it seemed like no one else would, James said as they sat in his living room with Patricia and the kids. James, I just did my job, but I have to tell you, your grace under pressure impressed me. A lot of people would have become bitter or angry, but you never lost faith that the truth would come out. Patricia squeezed her husband's hand. James always taught our children that honesty and integrity matter, even when it's hard. This whole experience proved that he practices what he preaches. Lisa, James's daughter, had written an essay about the experience for her English class. Her teacher had encouraged her to submit it to a national youth writing contest. Dad, I wrote about how you never gave up hope even when things looked really bad. I wanted other kids to know that good people sometimes face unfair situations, but that doesn't make them less good. The community response had been overwhelmingly positive once the truth came out. The local NAACP chapter presented James with a Community Service Award, recognizing his dignity in the face of false accusations. The pastor at their church organized a welcome-back celebration that drew over 200 people. "This experience taught me something important," James told the congregation during the celebration. "It taught me that there are more good people in this world than bad ones. Yes, one person's desperation and poor choices put my family through a nightmare. But look how many people stepped forward to support us once the truth came out." Catherine Whitman's trial took place 3 months later. She pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 18 months in prison, plus 3 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay restitution to the insurance company and to James for damages to his reputation. At the sentencing hearing, James did something that surprised everyone, including his own family. He asked to make a statement to the court. "Your Honor, Mrs. Whitman's actions caused my family tremendous pain and hardship. But I also recognize that she was a desperate person who made terrible choices. I hope she gets the help she needs to address her gambling addiction and rebuild her life. I don't want revenge, I just want justice and the chance to move forward." Even Catherine's lawyer was moved by James's statement. Catherine herself was crying as she heard his words of forgiveness rather than anger. A year later, James was thriving in his new role as head of facilities management at Hartwell Insurance. He had hired additional staff and implemented new procedures that improved building security, while also ensuring fair treatment for all employees. Detective Lucy Chen was promoted to sergeant, partly based on her exemplary work on the Washington case. She often used the case as an example when training new detectives about the importance of looking beyond surface appearances. The Washington family had moved to a larger house in a better neighborhood, thanks to James's promotion and the settlement from the company. But more importantly, they had grown closer as a family through the ordeal. "Dad, do you ever think about what would have happened if Detective Chen hadn't kept investigating?" Lisa asked one evening at dinner. James considered the question carefully. "I try not to think about that too much, sweetheart. But I will say this. It reinforced my belief that the truth has a way of coming out even when it takes time. Sometimes you just have to have faith and keep doing the right thing." Patricia smiled at her husband. "Your father never lost faith even on the darkest days. That's the kind of man he is." As James tucked his son David into bed that night, David asked him, "Dad, why did Mrs. Whitman lie about you?" "Son, sometimes people make bad choices when they're scared or desperate. It doesn't make it right, but it helps us understand that everyone is fighting battles we don't know about. The important thing is that we choose to respond with integrity, even when others don't." The case had become a local legend of sorts, a reminder that justice sometimes takes time, but that truth and integrity ultimately prevail. James Washington had gone from being an accused thief to being a symbol of dignity under pressure and the importance of thorough investigation over quick judgments. Most importantly, the experience had shown that when good people stand up for what's right, whether it's a detective who refuses to accept easy answers or a community that rallies around an innocent man, justice can triumph over prejudice and assumptions. James still cleaned offices sometimes, now as part of his management duties rather than his daily routine, but every time he did, he remembered the morning when his world had been turned upside down, and he felt grateful for the people who had refused to give up on finding the truth. The diamond ring that had started it all was eventually returned to Catherine's ex-husband as part of the divorce settlement. But for James Washington, the real treasure had been learning that his faith in justice and the goodness of people had been well placed all along.